Hey guys, we're doing another toolbox talk on center lines, partly to lead into more of the gold tail and do a shameless plug for the Action Tech gold tails and why we mount them that way, but I'll berate other people and give my grumpy old opinion momentarily once we talk about center lines. Typically you have to, as you've already seen on the center line, you come down around a turnaround shiv, whatever that may be. We have fixed rollers because we're lazy and we like plug and play. You may have a hillbilly setup with just a span set choked around, and you have to measure where your pulley exit is from the top core of the truss. You may have a flip-flop block, which is wonderful, and it may be bolted to a piece of aluminum, which is great, or aluminium, depending on where you're from. The fact is, you need to know what the exit center lines are so that you can line up all of your equipment, and this becomes important, especially now you're fixing a gold tail to the truss. All right, so let's say you're using a flip-flop. Here's a flip-flop. It's on a 10 mil piece of plate. So the center line, I've already measured, and I'm not going to bore you with using calipers now, but I've measured it's 20 mil center line on this block from its base mount, and it's another 25 from the inside, 24 and a half from the inside of the bottom of the clamp, which is the cord, and I measure them both in when it's in place and when it's not. So just to double check myself, because I get confused sometimes. So basically you got 44 to 45 here in height, center line, and you have a clutch, which you need to use because you want a progress capture if you're gonna run a gold tail, because if you're gonna hoik people up in the air, you need a way to hold them up there. On set, you know, they're like, take them up, and you gotta get them up there and hold them and then drop them. Okay, which is fine and dandy. Outdoors, it'll be the same thing. You'll be off of not the reds. It may be far higher than 15 meters. It may be an inordinate distance. You may hate it, which is why I automate it with capstans, which are also running on the center line. But for the sake of, let's forget about the motivation factor, whether it's manpower or a capstan, or you can even take them up on a ratchet. If you air fill slow and use that as a hoist, just any kind of machinery is better than doing it by hand. So you've got your turnaround roller. Your working line is coming through your turnaround roller at a center line of 44, 45. You have a clutch you're coming through because you've hoiked them up, you got to hold them up there. So this has a center line of around 45, 46. I give it that range because I can be like within 1 mil specific, but 1 mil fleet is not going to make or break this whole thing. So right now, 44, 45, 45, 46, we're within a mil. Okay, if we take the median of both, we're in a mil. All right, so this is, but here's the difference. This is mounted on an 8 millimeter plate. Okay, in order to achieve that, we're on an 8 mil plate, or else this would be 2 millimeter higher. So it would put us yet 1 more millimeter out of sync with the turnaround shiv, in this case the flip-flop, and we'd be looking at 2 millimeters of out of alignment, which every millimeter of fleet becomes a problem. You're rubbing on something. You're causing A, wear on your parts, and B, creating friction on your running line. And you don't want to do that. You want to know exactly where and what your friction is caused by. In this case, we're doing a gold tail drop, so we want the gold tail to be our friction, not everything else in its line. So right now, this is on an 8 mil plate. Now, if this was on a 10 mil plate, this would be 48 high, okay, to center line. This is an 8, so a 10. It's 2 mil thicker. So this would be 2 mil higher, 48 minus half the diameter of the 12 mil rope we're using. Okay, so minus 6. So 48 minus 6 is 42. So if that was on a 10 mil plate at 42, and this is on a 10 mil plate, so we have our height now of 44, 45. So if we were to take 6 away from that, we're at 39 or 38, so between 38, 39. So 38, 39, and then this currently is at 40. So we're 1 to 2 mil max. And the fact is this is more 45 than it is 44. I've measured it 10 times and I came up with 44 a couple times and 45 most of the time. So I'm gonna believe the 45. And this is 46, so we have 1 mil difference here in our heights, okay? If I was to put this on an 8 mil, we'd increase that to 2, if it's 2 at best, 2.5 to 3 at worst, okay? So Every mil counts. So there's a reason why this is on a 10 and this is on an 8. Now, nobody thinks about that when they go make plates. They just take a bunch of alley, they punch holes in it and start bolting stuff down. Your center lines are important, kids. Things work in a system. I can't harp this enough. I say this every time we do one of these videos. It's a system. It's not just a random collection of parts. This is part of my big peeve with mostly coordinators who purchase equipment. They think because they've got boxes of pulleys that they've got a rigging kit. It doesn't work that way, folks. All these little items are what make or break your system. Otherwise you're having to, in German it's called bastel, but you're having to create or hillbilly or rig your rigging. It's not just rigging the gag, now it's rigging the rigging, because you're having to work twice as hard to create an effect that you have disparate parts to function. So here on a gold tail drop, you come around your flip-flop or your turnaround shiv, because it could be any number of things. You go through your clutch and you have to go to your gold tail. Now, as you've heard in our previous wrap with our gold tails, this is one I haven't put together yet, and I'll shameless plug it. It features 6061 T6, it's laser engraved. It has dated on when it was manufactured. It has a working load limit because we test them, and I think I'll do one, as I've promised already, on how we test these on the clamps even, because that's how we run them. Stainless barrel nuts, which are machined, and we use the billet gates. There's no tolerances, they don't rattle. They slide smoothly, hard coat anodizing. They don't scratch. Okay, so this is what we use. These are our gold tails. We've pull tested them. We'll show you how we pull test them. But this is the device. Now, having this device, which is currently mounted to here, there's a couple things to think about. The best way to use this, well, it isn't on its spine, as we've already discussed. Unless you're a midget or unless you're laying on the floor, that doesn't work, okay? Secondarily, you're running against the gates if you're down low. Your hand is higher than this off the ground. Thirdly, we've mentioned that people have come up with these wizard solutions. Oh, put a rod. So they make this solid and then put a rod through here. So you have a round rod at each of these gates. Wonderful. Why are you running it against the gate? The gate is just like a wire carabiner. It's a gate to keep the rope from falling out and allow rope to go in and out easily. You don't run against the gate. So that is not really a solution to mounting on its spine, because you're using the wrong side of the gold tail. Use the spine, folks. So if you're going to mount it vertically, you can't use the spine unless it's high enough to pull down, as we've already said. We did it in our preliminary wrap. I won't keep beating on that. So what's the solution? Well, you mount it horizontally. Now there's a million easy ways to mount this horizontally. We can do it with a span set off the center point of our mounting plate in back that's center lined. We can do it, there's a million ways, okay? None of them are very permanent and very elegant. What we do here is we use bobbins. I'll take one of these apart and show you. We use bobbins that fit in the eyes of the gold tail. And what that means is they're billet aluminum chunks that are machined, and they're the thickness of the gold tail. They feature two pieces. They're a spacer underneath to set your height, and they are a bobbin on the top that fits the eye with a 12 or 10 mil bolt. This happens to be the 12s. 12 millimeter stainless bolt. The way this sets up is it goes into the eye. Here's your eye and your gold tail. It fits snugly into the eye. You set your spacer. Now this is important because, as I've given the whole conversation on center lines, and no one seems to pay attention, you put these on the center line so that your rope will enter. Now remember, rope 12 mil, and I'm trying to do this while I'm watching you. Give me 1 second. And I can bolt this together with my hands here. What you have is the top of the gold tail, because you don't want the rope running across the bobbins, needs to be at a height lower than the bottom of the rope as it exits, okay? So your last item prior to this device is your clutch. This clutch is 46 mil high, okay, to the center line. Minus the 6 mil of the rope is 40. So the top of this should be 40 or less, okay? When we mount these, we thought about this long and hard. You need to be able to open these gates, okay? Otherwise, the gates can't open. So there's a minimum height here, which is 3.25 millimeter. Okay, so you can only get these set to a certain height, as low as they go. Okay, so what you do is you need to know your center line in order to order the spacers for your bobbins, and then you can mount this way. We sell this kit. This is not anodized version. We sell spacers in various heights: 3.5, 3 mil, 3.5 mil, 5 mil, based on common heights. For these clutches, which I use, the clutches and the Harkin flip-flops, the spin lock clutches, the Harkin flip-flops, within a millimeter of each other. Those are the common suppliers. So my setup, I tried to make it as low as possible. I don't want shit sitting up in the air. So I didn't go 12 mil, 14 mil plate on anything. I've gone 8 mil and 10 mil on everything, which is more than strong enough for what we're doing. And you can look up the materials chart. You can look at the strength of 6061 aluminum. You can play these games, which I have done, but I won't bore you with the detail. Let's just put it this way. For tons and tons of force, they're more than strong enough. The same with the 12 mil bolts. 12 mil bolts in shear are phenomenally strong, and the only way we're running this, because it's on center line, is in shear, okay? So now we've set this up, and it's on a 3.5 mil spacer, and we know that to the top of our bobbin, zero it. Is just under 40 or 3987, call it 40 millimeter. So now our bobbin, the top of our bobbin is at 40 millimeter. Our exit on the clutch is at 40 millimeter. Okay, we know that. So yes, it might rub gently on the top of the bobbin. We can't get this any lower. Okay, we cannot get this any lower. So the point is, or else your gates won't open. See, otherwise the gate would be in the way, but because there's enough room, the gate will open. You can use this. So this is set at its lowest point, hence the spacing. This is set at an 8 mil. If I wanted this higher, I could go to a 10 mil plate, okay, which works for this. It doesn't work for this as optimally. Now, if this and this are spaced a wide distance apart, then it's not too bad. It's 2 mil, 2.5 mil. We can live with that. It is, after all, a braking device. But the point is here is to build stuff so that it all works together. And these are all plus or minus a mil on this setup, using the smallest spacer that still allows the gold tail to function. Okay, whatever your clamp is, the gates will still pass the clamp. Okay, so your gold tail is held off the clamps by 3.5 mil. Okay, that's as tight as you can get it. So now I can run this with basically basically touching this, and under tension it won't touch because there'll be so much tension in the rope it will barely graze this bobbin. Or I could go and space everything up a little more in front, but then you start having to have, if you're worried to the millimeter, then you'd have to machine plates to 9 millimeter instead of 10. You could play games. But within plus or minus 1 to 2 millimeter, it works quite well, and you don't have a lot of friction because there isn't a lot of force generated on it. So the gold tails that we build, here's the newer ones. This is one of the last run with the machined engraving, and these are the newer runs with the laser engraving. I'm not using these as samples because I don't want to scratch them because I sell them. The new gold tails with these bobbins you can order as an extra kit. We'll be putting a price on them, but this is how I've mounted them for ages. Flat, horizontal, and it gives you the most versatility. Again, I'm not going to get into why you don't want to swivel because we've beat that to death. It's the internet and people. The fact is, if you pull against the spine and it's on a swivel, it's going to rotate your gold tail. Okay, so you've lost a friction way there. We did a whole little wrap on gold tails, which you've already watched, and using them on this. And needless to say, these with the bobbins and these with the improved radiuses with the stainless hardware are pretty much the Bugatti of gold tails currently for a standard gold tail. Now, if you like bells and whistles, it's kind of like the discussion for a lot of people on weight saving a carbon fiber in an impact environment, which makes no sense. You can do whatever you want. Put a swivel on it, it's cool, but it doesn't function. We're looking for optimal function, okay? You can mount them to these clamps. Clamps are either 500 or 750 kilos, standard Dowdies. So with 2 clamps on a truss bar, you have more than enough to handle the force that's generated. Now, you might say, oh, but clamps can slip. Well, the fact is, yes, they could if you don't tighten them down. But the way you put them on the truss, there's always 2 cross cords connecting, so they're going to stop at whichever one, which is a worst case scenario if you haven't tightened them. Or when you've tightened them, we've developed a way to test that here, and we'll show you the results. It's pretty cool. We put these 2 clamps on a pipe, put a rope through this, locked it back off to itself, so the gold tail's locked, and pulled these clamps, tightened by hand, on a piece of 50 millimeter truss tube, and we'll give you the results. It's pretty amazing. So the 1 or 2 millimeter up or down on this, if it's up too high, it's going to rub slightly on the stainless hardware, which will add a minor bit of friction. If it's a couple mil too low, you're free and clear. Right now, we've set this up as a 0. So the fact is, I've designed everything for a 3.5 mil spacer to be the 0 with my commonly used apparatus. Okay? So these can all work as a system. Funny enough, we have our turnaround shivs, which is in the front, which we've talked about, and the way they come through is a little bit different than this block, which saves the difference between this and this. So these are the only 2 I have to worry about. Because of the 60 mil roller, I've changed the way things run up front. But that's just me for easiness. So that's today's wrap on centerline and a shameless plug. If you want gold tails, we have them in stock for sale. They're EU made. So if you're in England, there's one distributor that has them. If you want the bobbins, I'll be putting a price on them because I spin those up by hand here. These are not anodized. They will be anodized in a color of my choice. I may make them red just so you see them. I may make them black. I don't know. It's up to me. And you can change whether it's 10 or 12s. Because we have clamps that have 12 millimeter, I'm running a 12. You have clamps that have a 10 millimeter thread, you can run a 10. If you look at the loading chart on shear on a 10, you still are well above on a design factor for using these in shear on your truss. So that's the thing. Here's the gold tails. Here's the next run of gold tails, which were made on the 24th of April. We've been playing with them. That's when they started running them. They didn't get done until June sometime because the anodizing takes forever and the laser engraving takes forever. And I was gone on vacation for a few weeks. So this was the last run of 100 for this go round, and they're available now. And that way you just have to know if you want to mount them on your truss, mount them in the correct fashion so you're not running on the gates and you are running in your center line. You just need to know what your center line is. And then you can get your bobbins accordingly. You get your bobbin spacers and go accordingly. All right? Everything 6061 T6, stainless steel hardware, A4, and it is supremely strong. You have generally minimum a 10-to-1 design factor on these things for what you're pulling. It's about all I can say, and that's just a random number. Even if it's a 5-to-1, like a lot of things, as long as you know it, you can calculate it. That's if you calculate. Remember, this wrap is about knowing what you're doing. This isn't about just doing it. Okay, this way you can design a system that functions for what you need to do. And the gold tails are going fast, so get one. And if you want a kit to mount it, just let us know. You can message us online. We have our Action Tech website, which I tend to not pay attention to. My phone number is attached to many things. We are here in Berlin, Germany. They are shippable worldwide, and get one. They actually work quite well, especially with the new ropes we use. Thanks a lot, and you take care.